Hello and welcome back. So in part one of this series of videos, I counted down from 10 to 6 in my scariest Halloween Horror Nights houses of all time. God, that's a mouthful. So I went from 10 to 6. So if you missed that, go ahead and hit part 1. So in today's video, I'm going to be counting down from 5 to 1, my number 1 most scary house personally at Halloween Horror Nights of all time, of all of the ones that I've ever been through. I think I said in part 1, I've been through about 90 some odd at this point in my 11 years attending the event. And this is just my personal opinion. You know, things that scare me might not necessarily scare somebody else. But hey, that's what the fun of life is. Variety is the spice of life. I don't know. Let's not get too cliche here. So without further ado, here we go. Number 5, Insidious. So I think that the pre-hype for this particular house did its job a little bit too well for me. Because interestingly enough, I would not say that Insidious is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. Like, not even of recent-ish years. I wouldn't really put it up there. I don't dislike it. It just didn't really do a whole lot for me. It wasn't really about what I thought it was going to be about. I mean, I think the astral projection angle was cool, and in that respect, it is really neat that they did something a little different. And I like that they broke that cliche of the people, like, immediately when something's wrong, still stay in the house. Like, those people got the hell out of there. And that was neat. It just, the movie did not scare me. And I've only ever seen the first one. I just didn't really care to see the others. Maybe that'll change. Maybe at some point I will watch them. I mean, without Horror Nights, I'm very desperate for horror content this year. So, hey, maybe this is the year that I start watching things that I've never seen before. But I digress. The house, though, I remember reading shortly before the event started that even people that worked there didn't want to go to inside this one during the day. And maybe that was totally fabricated to scare guests that were considering coming down to Halloween Horror Nights. But I read that and that already unsettled me. But even without that element, I think this one still would have scared me a lot. There was just something very off-putting about it. Like, the whole thing just felt wrong. And I'm not saying it was bad. It was very well done based off of what I've seen. I know there were some things from the 2 following, like the 1, 2, and 3. See, I don't even know how many there are. I think there are at least 3 at this point. But some of the scenes I didn't immediately recognize. The one that I knew was going to be in there was like the creepy, like, frozen family, like the mom ironing, and the shotgun in that scene did scare me. But I guess this was one of those things that the movie didn't scare me, but living it did, because this house just unnerved me. And it just, the sound effects and the movement, like, I think just things that move in a natural way really scare me. But I said that in part 1 about the Silent Hill house. I just never wanted to really spend a whole lot of time in this one. I did this one a couple of times that year, but I did not really enjoy it. And I know I'm not being very specific. I'm keeping it kind of vague, but this is just one that I can't really name. It just, the subject matter of it, it felt oppressive. It didn't feel like a fun scary. It felt like a I am not safe scary. So let's just leave it at that for that one. Number 4, a recent house, actually one from, at the time of this video being filmed, from the year before, Halloween Horror Nights 29, and that is Graveyard Games. Oh my God, love Graveyard Games. One of the best originals they've ever done. One of my favorite scenic designs of all of them that I've been through. I mean, I said in my scenic design video that just give me a house set in a cemetery or a graveyard and I'm good to go, because there's so much you can do with that. It's such an environment that people associate with scary things, haunted things, that it just on every level for me works. And I really liked this one. But this was one of the only ones that I did not really want to walk through very slowly. Most of these houses, I want to go as slow as I can without getting yelled at by the security people. And look at all of those details. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go on the Unmasking the Horror tour last year, and this was one of the houses I got to go in. I talk about it in my scenic design video and put some pictures in there, so check that out if you haven't. I really liked how elaborate the story was for this one. This is why I'm more drawn to the original houses a lot of the time, because I appreciate the stories that they do come up with and the story they can tell through the medium of a haunted house. And there's so many fewer restrictions than there are with IPs. So the story of this one was fantastic, and it felt so real. And there was this sense of, we have to get out of here. This was one, like I said, I didn't want to go slow and look at the details, even though it was beautiful. I wanted to hurry up and get out because I knew we were not supposed to be in the graveyard. The glowing mother is coming to get us. And then, of course, probably one of the scariest rooms in any house that I have ever been in, ever, was, and you guys know the one, the pitch black one with the soundproofing so that the audio felt like it was happening right here and moving all around you. Going in that for the first time, and this was something I think was just like a universal experience for everybody that went in this house. The first time you stepped into that room, it stopped being a house and it was like, oh, bleep, this is real. And that unsettled me so much the first night that I would just like, my heart would start pounding the closer and closer we would get to that room upon repeat visits. And of course it was like right at the end. So it was like, oh God, what a way to end a house. I mean, I loved it, but also, God, it was one of those times it's like, don't touch me, don't get near me. And I didn't know the first time, like there could have been a person in there that could have jumped and been right here in my face. So Jesus, and that is something I have never, in my 11 years attending the event, I don't know if they've ever done anything like this before, but it was my first time experiencing something like that. And bravo to them for like changing up the game, because Graveyard Games really was just so scary. Also, side note, the second thing in that house that scared me the most was the mask with the really creepy like stretch smiles. Oh my God, every time I'd go through, I would want to shield myself from those masks. Ugh. Number 3. So I am cheating on this one a little bit, but come on, if you have ever heard me talk about my biggest fears, you knew we were not going to get through this video without me mentioning something wolf related. So it's a tie between American Werewolf in London and the Wolfman House from 2009. So the reason I put both of them was because I didn't really see a lot of the Wolfman Haunted House in 2009. And I have talked about this before. So in short, I am terrified of werewolves. I'm terrified of anything wolf or werewolf related. I am getting a little bit better about it as the years go on. And I will say I do like American Werewolf in London. I think it's great. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be the first time I watched it. I think it's like really funny and brilliant. But I was, from a young age, very traumatized by wolf howling sounds. So when I was in preschool, they would play like Sounds of Nature. And in one of the Sounds of Nature clips that they put on at nap time, there were wolves howling in it. And that was not something that I enjoyed. It is not something that I enjoy to this day. If I hear a wolf howl, like I get a chill down my spine. And then I also saw the Stephen King movie adaptation of his short story Silver Bullet, probably at far too young of an age, and I didn't like that either. The little boy, if you've seen it, the little boy with the kite who just wanted to fly his kite. Why? There were so many things about that movie that just unsettled me. So anyway, that's like number one biggest fear, wolves and werewolves. So the first year I attended Halloween Horror Nights, when I went in to the event, I knew there was a Wolfman Haunted House based off of the remake. And I have seen that one. That one's not that bad. I mean, it's not great, but it's really not that bad. I hadn't seen the movie at that time, but I knew that this was one that my friends wanted to go in. And I saw the first room with like the, I don't think you're supposed to say this word anymore, but I don't know what else to call it. Sorry, it was the gypsy camp. I do apologize for using that word. But the camp with the carts and things like that. And I just buried my face in my friend's back and I just cried the whole way through. Not like I'm having a complete come apart and like falling everywhere. I just like cried into my friend's back. I looked up at one other point during the house and I saw the Wolfman from above. I heard sounds. I heard growling near me at different points in time. And this was my first year at the event and I loved it up until that point. Nothing else really scared me as badly as this. But because that is such an extreme fear for me, I was terrified. I was crying. My heart was beating really loud. I wanted nothing more than that experience to just be over. So I had to put that on the list because like there's so like few times that I genuinely feel fear at Halloween Horror Nights, and this was one of them, so I had to mention it. But really the bigger part of this two-parter here for number 3 is American Werewolf in London. So a few years down the line, we get American Werewolf in London. I think, okay, perhaps I am better equipped to deal with this time. And I, in fact, was. But did I like it? Sort of. I thought it was creative. It was like largely puppets, and that was cool. That was something different. But when a giant wolf puppet is lunging at you, that's less cool for me. So this one really deeply terrified me. My genuine horror movie scream, as people have told me over the years that I have, came out on that day that we first went into American Werewolf in London. And then, oh boy, oh goody, American Werewolf in London came back a second time, and the house was nearly identical, except they took the TARDIS out of that room where you were in like the larger London scene, and that was a fun Easter egg. Why'd they take that out? I don't know. I digress. And I think like that second time I was like, I can do this time. I know what's gonna happen. I know where the scares are. So I did better. But I hear a wolf, I see a wolf, I see a giant animatronic wolf puppet do this, and I'm out. Nope, bye. Let's just call it a day. Don't like it at all. So that's why I had to put this on the list. Both of those for number 3. Okay, we are getting closer and closer. So my number 2 scariest house of all time was Hive. Okay, let's talk about Hive for a minute, because I like Hive. I don't dislike Hive. Okay. So some of you might be aware of the fact that this was a concept that came together at the, kind of the 11th hour for the event. There is a lawsuit going on, or was at that point in time, for the Conjuring franchise, and thus the originally planned Conjuring haunted house that was supposed to take place the year that Hive did was scrapped, despite the fact that it had already begun or had already been in construction. So they took the Conjuring house skeleton and they turned it into a den for vampires. Now, I will give this house all the props in the entire world, because the last time they had to scrap a house, when they scrapped Scream and they turned it into The Purge, that was just sad. That's one of my least favorite houses of all time. I went through that sucker once, and The Purge doesn't deserve to be talked about in this video. So going into this one, I thought, okay, the last time they scrapped a house, it wasn't great. So I thought maybe this one is kind of going to be the dud this year. Add that to the fact that for many, many years, the case is whatever house I go into first, it's not the greatest run. And that has changed. Like, that hasn't been true for several years now. And it really was just in like the early days. We would always run to a house and not all the actors would be in it, and not everybody was like in the full swing of things yet. And stupidly, even though that had changed, I kind of thought that would be the case for Hive. So we go to this tent house, fine, first house of the night, whatever. I'm with my friend that night. And why do I go to the tent houses and go in those first and think that's going to be a good idea? Because your eyes never adjust in time unless you close your eyes or wear sunglasses. So we walk into this dark ass haunted house. I can't see a thing. And all of a sudden these vampires start popping out at me, and it was legitimately like cramped and uncomfortable and scary, and the people hanging from the ceiling. I didn't know what to think the first time. I was so scared from not being able to see, from hearing horrifying noises, from what I could see being so unsettling and like gross. It was overload for me. I have never come out of a first run of a haunted house that frazzled. I had to sit down by the Men in Black bathrooms for like 15 minutes after this house. I could not breathe from screaming so loud. I needed like a full bottle of water. I was not ready. I went into Hive like, okay, and they handed me my ass on the way out. Also, this was the year I had to take my mother in a wheelchair down there. And again, having gone through it, knowing what happened the first time, I wheel her into Hive. It's dark. There's one party in front of us. And eventually that party gets too far ahead of us, because pushing a wheelchair through a haunted house is hard, you guys. So hard that at one point during Hive, I accidentally wheeled her into the boo hole for the character. Didn't slow the character down. They came out over us. I screamed. At one point, I'm just like crouching, holding the handles, ducking behind the wheelchair. This house was no joke. These actors had so much energy and they brought it every time. I really believed that they were after me. They wanted my blood. They wanted me out of their little house that definitely wasn't the house from The Conjuring. But anyway, this one was great. This was one that I like so severely underrated. And I remember taking my cousin through this one too. And just at one point getting separated from her because the actor that would like come out of the wall towards the end, like came between us and created a divide. And she came out of that one. That was her favorite that year. She really loved Hive. And just anytime you went into it, it was consistent from opening to like midway through the event is when I went that year. And from what I read afterwards, it stayed pretty consistent. Like I just have to give props to this one, to the Hive cast, to everything about Hive. They really pulled this one off when I didn't believe they could do it. And that'll teach me to doubt the will and the majesty of Halloween Horror Nights ever again. Okay, here we go. Number 1, the scariest Halloween Horror Nights house I have ever been in. Dead Exposure Patient 0. I hated this. And I don't mean that to insult anybody on the creative team. I don't mean that to insult any of the actors. Just the opposite. I hated every minute of this because they did a good job. I was not around for the original Dead Exposure. That was, I believe, a year or two before I first started going to the event. Just thinking about this house and just remembering what happened just really like takes me back to that first moment going in. And I knew the concept was that it was gonna be dark. I didn't know it was gonna be that dark. And when you start off a house, I don't like monkeys. I was traumatized by seeing Outbreak as a young child. And from that day on, I don't do like primates or anything like that. So to start off this house with screeching monkeys when I can't see them, that the lights go out and then all of a sudden there's one right here. No. The subway scene, it just really all of these scenes, the way the scenic was done with the black and white was amazing. And when those lights would go out, they would go out for a really long time. I remember just like wailing in this one with fear. We came out of this one after the first time and the people behind me turned around and they were like, "Are you okay?" And then they told me, they were like, "You have the perfect scream for a horror movie," which is something I've heard over and over again. I guess I just have that stereotypical like girl scream from a horror movie. But they were like, "Are you sure you're okay?" Because at points during the house, like I couldn't see anything. So I kept running into them, accidentally grabbing them. I was so frazzled. I have never been that like messy in a haunted house. I'm usually the one that's like, grab my backpack. It's going to be fine. Let's do this. I can be the leader. I'm fine. I don't get too scared to be able to lead a crew through the haunted house. Not in this one. I didn't trust myself to ever go in this one again. And as a matter of fact, after opening weekend, I didn't want to go in this one again. It scared me that badly. I went back down with my cousin and I would have gone in it if she'd wanted me to. I would have made her stand in front. That's for damn sure. But she saw somebody when we were coming out of the exit of the other tent house that year. She saw somebody come out of Dead Exposure Patient 0 and they were like crying and she got too scared to even go in it. So cut to the last weekend that I went down with some other friends that were honest to God, like they didn't want to go in a haunted house to begin with, but I was their spirit guide through the experience and they, came around to it. We went in several that night and they really enjoyed it because I was like the tour guide of the haunted house. And we'd also had a few signature drinks at that point. So I thought, hey, the park's about to close. We're going to go out like winners here. We're going to go in the scariest house at the event. So we go into Dead Exposure Patient 0 and it seemed like a good idea up until we walked back inside and I was the leader because I had agreed to be the leader that whole night. I didn't really mind, but we got inside and I was a little better than I was that first trip through, but still, even we came out and they were like, Wow, Carson, that was like really different than these other haunted houses we've been in. Are you okay? Because you didn't seem okay in that one like you did with the others. But we did it, and that was the last house we hit that night. We went out like winners. I went in it a second time just to prove I'm not a sissy, but I would still have to say this is the scariest house to me that I've ever done. Some of you might think, what? That one wasn't even scary at all. But you know what? To that I say, I don't care. I am scared of when the lights go out and when they come back on, someone is right here. That's not something that I want to experience. So there you have it. There are my top 10 scariest Halloween Horror Nights houses of all time. Again, God, that's a mouthful. I am optimistic that this list could change sometime in the near future. You know, I have one as recent as Graveyard Games on here. So over time, I'll be curious to see what changes in terms of scares for me. I will be back with some Halloween fun because in the absence of Horror Nights, I do have a little something else planned, which I will be documenting. So be on the lookout for that sometime in late October, early November. So I'll see you guys then.